Good morning, everyone. So today we are out touching grass at the range, and I decided to do this outside because it is just a beautiful March 1st. I like top 5 lists. Part of me likes making them, part of me likes even watching and reading them, but I recognize that they're gun slop. It's kind of the junk food of gun content, but I think they can be better. And in the future, I'm going to try and make some good top 5 lists that give you good information. Until I figure out how to do that, we're going to talk about the top 5 worst guns, because it's really easy to pick top 5 worst guns in my collection. And we're going to start with the Guerrilla gun from Richardson Industries. So this is actually a really fascinating gun, and the reason it's number 5 and not higher is because it's pretty honest about what it is. This is a simple slam fire shotgun. You can make one of these with parts from Home Depot. So you put the projectile in the barrel, align the two, there's a firing pin inside, slam it, and it fires. Not a whole lot to it, but it does have a really interesting story. If you guys want a full video on this, let me know. But essentially, a man named Ilif Richardson was in the Navy, and I believe he was a maybe lieutenant junior grade on a PT boat. And they fought off some Japanese ships, got damaged, went to the Philippines for repairs. About the same time their ship was getting repaired, the Philippines got invaded by the Japanese. So Ilif and a lot of Americans, fled. They couldn't fight a Japanese army by themselves, so they joined up with the guerrillas. So Ilif really helped the guerrillas succeed, primarily because he was capable of setting up communications. I'm not going to go too far into it. There's a really good book called American Guerrilla about Mr. Richardson, and it's worth reading. But one notable thing was that he talked about the different weapons the guerrillas had, and they had a lot of these kind of homemade shotguns. So they wanted shotgun ammo from the Americans, and they would use these guns a lot like how the Liberator was used back in the day. So they would shoot a Japanese soldier with one of these and then take his rifle. So these were cheap, efficient, and really used to capture weapons. So when Mr. Richardson got back to the States, he decided he would dabble in the firearms industry and produce replicas, I guess, of the Guerrilla guns. So as you'd imagine, these were not very successful. There was 2 models, and this is the simpler model, believe it or not. There is a more complicated model that at least has a vertical grip to help you fire the weapon. Now this is essentially a crudely done wood stock with a bolt holding the receiver, I guess, onto the stock, and another bolt that can lock the barrel in so it doesn't just fall out when you're moving around. So twist that little nut, pop it out, and you're ready to go. Now this is not a very effective firearm for anything. It's actually really hard to aim. The bead on this one has fallen off because it was made in the 50s. And it's really kind of useful or useless, but it has a great story. For that reason, I can't appreciate it, and that's why it's number 5. It's not the worst gun I own, and it's really more about the story than the gun itself. If you guys want a full video on this gun, and maybe I could talk a little bit more about Mr. Richardson, let me know below. But for now, this is an absolutely terrible gun for anything other than the story, and I don't know, showing people. It's a good conversation piece, and that's about it. Now in 2025, the AR-15 is the most maligned weapon by the gun control industry. But prior to the AR-15 and the AK-47, the gun they hated the most was the Tech 9. Now this is specifically a Tech DC-9, which was produced after several bans of this firearm, specifically Washington, D.C. banned it by name. And so to get around that ban, they changed the name and a few other features. The heat shroud is a little different. I think they added this sling swivel to the back. Maybe the sights are different, little things, but it didn't really matter. Anyway, so the Tech 9 is a semi-automatic blowback operated pistol. It's a straight blowback gun designed by George Kellgren, but he didn't stay with Intratec long. Shroud's easily removable. And he originally designed this in his home country, I believe Sweden, as a cheap submachine gun that could replace the Carl Gustaf M/45, which is a really, really nice submachine gun. But it didn't really take off there. So he brought it to America, made it a semi-auto pistol. The original was the KG-99, which had an open bolt, but the ATF was really, they didn't really dig the vibe of that gun, so they required them to be closed bolt eventually. A lot of these popped up in TV shows of the era, always used by the bad guy. Specifically, was it Miami Vice? Had a bunch of KG-99s that were converted to full auto, which looked pretty cool on screen. And throughout this gun's production, it was kind of the bad guy gun of the industry. Now why? What exactly makes this thing so deadly? Nothing really. I mean, yeah, it has a 30-round magazine or 33, I can't remember how many rounds. You can't get through a magazine reliably, so it doesn't really matter. It looks kind of scary, I guess, but ultimately it's not that efficient. The recoil is substantial due to the straight blowback design and the very heavy bolt. The ergonomics are absolutely terrible. The sights suck. The safety is the bolt. You push it in for safe. Let's see, the only really notable thing about this was the fact that it used a polymer frame, or a polymer lower receiver, whatever you want to call it. That was kind of rare for the era and kind of interesting, but that's really it. Ultimately, this gun is, I like to call it a paper tiger, where it looks deadly and it's supposed to be this really crazy weapon that could shoot through schools, I guess, but in reality it was just kind of a junky 9mm pistol that was very cheaply made. It looked scary, looked good on TV, that was it. It does not perform very well. So today I actually fired more than 5 rounds without it stopping, which is rare. So it turns out it really likes Monarch steel case ammo, so I'm going to keep that in mind. But as you see from the videos, it often failed to fire for some reason. And those rounds wouldn't even have a primer indent, so I don't know what's going on there. Other times when you get to the last 2 rounds on the magazine, it won't feed them. It acts like there's no ammo there, so you have to load more than 2 rounds just to shoot the thing. So you load 5 rounds, you can shoot 3. The 2 in the bottom are just considered bonus rounds, I guess, that do nothing. Now these were cheap then, but they're getting more expensive now, and it shocks me they're collectible. But they are kind of a cultural item, you know? They were from an era where gun control really had a lot of steam, and they really hated this gun. So the reason I own it is just because of how much people in the gun control industry hate it. But that doesn't mean you need to own it, and I wouldn't waste the money on one, especially at today's prices. So our next is the High Standard Model 10, which is has some really cool ideas, but terrible execution. So the original design started in the late 50s, where a police officer was trying to make the ultimate entry shotgun. So he wanted a bullpup gun. It's important to realize that bullpup's it's uncommon now, but also not rare. In this era, bullpup was rare. This was before the Styrogue really took over and became kind of the de facto military bullpup of the Cold War. So High Standard bought the design from this police officer, I believe his name was Barry Crouch, and they began developing their own. And essentially the High Standard Model 10 comes in 2 flavors, A and B. This is a B model, which is a bit simpler than the A model. And the idea was to create a semi-auto 12-gauge shotgun that a police officer could very easily use in entry situations and inside their vehicle. You know, shotguns are fairly large weapons, so High Standard wanted to shrink it to a bullpup format, which isn't really a terrible idea. The problem was the execution. So first and foremost, everything about this gun kind of sucks, minus the ergonomics are kind of okay. And the thing that really sucks the most was this gun has a lot of potential, and it could be really cool. I would love to see someone like Mossberg or Benelli or some serious company make a serious semi-auto bullpup shotgun that doesn't suck. All right, so let's see what the problems are. We can start at the front and work our way back. This is kind of neat. How often do you see a folding front sight from the 60s? Kind of rare, kind of neat. Not a problem. But then we get to this. So this thing is actually your rear sight, and it mounts a light. So the 10B came with a light installed, and it's kind of integral to the gun. Not a very powerful light, but for the 60s, that's kind of radical, right? So you can mount a light to this part if you have the light, but I don't think they're produced anymore. Then you have the carry handle, and this thing doesn't lock, so it moves all the time. And when you're shooting the gun, it happens to recoil right into your nose occasionally. So that hurts quite a bit. And speaking of recoil, this gun has terrible recoil. It is the heaviest recoiling shotgun I own. I would say it's worse than my 10 gauge. And it's just really unpleasant to shoot all around. We get to the stock. It swivels. Why? Because people are dumb. So the idea was that an officer could use it, swivel it, so they could brace it against their arm and fire from the hip, including firing from a vehicle, which is mentioned in either the High Standard catalog or the training book for this gun. So that all sucks. So when I said the ergonomics were okay, I was actually wrong. They're terrible. It's kind of coming back to me. So to load the gun, you have to press a button. You press the button, and that allows you to push down the loading gate. So the problem is if you, say, load 2 rounds, you let go of that button, well, you can't press it down again until you rack the weapon or unload the weapon. So it's really irritating if you forget not to load all 4 rounds and let the button go. The gun cannot be fired from the left shoulder. It even says that right here, because this charging handle will come back and hit you in the teeth. Now, the one ergonomic thing I like, and what kind of guided me saying it was okay, is they actually have a left side charging handle, which is kind of a neat idea for the era. It's kind of well thought out. This is your bolt close. So if when the bolt locks the rear, hit that button, closes your bolt. So not only is it kind of not very good ergonomically, the recoil is brutal, but it's also not reliable. It says here, where's the There's a thing on here. So ammunition, 12 gauge, 2 3/4 inch shells, mag or high brass only. I've put a lot of different kinds of rounds to this gun. It doesn't cycle any of them reliably. If I could fire a whole tube out of this gun at one time, I would be impressed. It just doesn't happen. It constantly jams. It fails to fire. It fails to load. It's just a mess. And you could blame it on the gun's age, but that seemed to be a problem throughout the entire production of the high standard Model 10s A and B. It is neat. It's a neat part of shotgun history, but there's a reason why you don't hear much about these guns these days. All right, because our next gun's so small, we're going to switch to a nut and fancy inspired tabletop style camera view, I guess. It's going to be the Taurus Curve, and I have the box here because I was going to show you that even the box was curved. So good for Taurus for really committing to the bit. Taurus Curve came at a time when Taurus, I think, was doing a lot of their work out of Florida, which means I think they met with Caltech and exchanged dealers' numbers, because this gun is clearly cocaine influenced. So the Taurus Curve did come with a little holster, which was kind of neat, and a little clip built in to make it easy to carry, and a curved design. So the idea was that you could put this pistol on your right hand side and it would match the curve of your body and be very comfortable and easy to carry. Neat. I will give them credit for out of the box thinking. But what you really have is kind of a modified TCP, which was Taurus's old Pocket 380 design. So this gun was not very successful. It came at a time when Taurus was doing weird stuff. Do you guys remember the View, which was like a revolver with a Lexan plate that you could see the internals, which I actually thought was cool, and I would have bought one if I ever found one. I picked this up for 90 bucks at an auction, and just for the lulz. So it does have, like I said, some neat ideas. The curve idea is original, but it also had this built-in, let me make sure. I mean, it probably wouldn't fire if I pointed at myself anyway. But I'm going to show you guys this. A built-in light and laser. And that's really your only sighting system. There's the button. So, oh, there it goes. Turned on. There's the laser and light. So it's about 40 whole lumens. And the idea is that when you pull this off, the light and laser automatically come on. So it's kind of neat. It doesn't always work that well. Now, to accommodate the design, the magazine's released in kind of an odd way. So you have to pinch them, pull them out. All right, so it's kind of weird, kind of novel. Did it work? No, it's not very reliable at all. I got through a whole magazine today, I think, and I was pretty impressed by that. And then after that, I got tons of jams, failure to go into battery, failures to fire, kind of just crappy all around. Notice the weird trigger too. I don't know what the deal with that is, but I guess it keeps, maybe it interacts better with the little safety or little holster you have here. So ultimately, as you'd imagine, this gun wasn't very successful. Left-handers were definitely kind of left out, if you know what I mean. It wasn't very accurate. There's no sights. That's your iron sights in case you can't see your laser. Like a day like this where it's super bright and nice out, you can't see that laser. So it's kind of useless. I did hit the target, the C-zone size steel target, pretty consistently with the gun using just that. But that's a big target, and I was only like 7 yards away at most. So this would be kind of like a belly gun. Shooting it, surprisingly, the recoil isn't bad as most Pocket 380s, and that's probably because it's a fair bit thicker than most. This is a thick little lady here, and I think that's to accommodate the curve. Oh, look, you can see the laser's on. So I guess I should turn that off, because I don't know how to change the batteries. And, you know, it might be worth $100 one day instead of 90. But I hate this gun, but at the same time, I like it because at least someone was doing something different. I also think integrating lights and lasers into a frame is kind of neat, but that's as far as this gun's going to get in terms of compliments. So the number one worst gun in my collection is without a doubt the Zip 22 by USFA. So the reason it's number one is because I had really high hopes for this. I was but a young gun owner at the time it came out, and I really thought it was a cool idea. I like weird guns. I like them a lot, and I like cheap weird guns. And this gun was $120 brand new, and it fired 22, so it'd be super cheap. And the Doug at USFA was promising all these accessories and all these cool little things you could do with the gun. You could even SBR it and mount it to your AR because, I don't know, if you wanted to. It's kind of a dumb idea. It took Ruger 1022 mags. The whole idea behind the gun was to create a fun gun, and it wasn't, because it never worked. As you guys saw, it fired a whole 1 of 5 rounds. It didn't even, and that's not just firing semi-auto. That was an issue too, but it only fired 1 of 5 with primer strikes, and those rounds I was using was decent federal ammo. Should have fired. Fires and everything else. So when this gun does run, It also sucks because the bolt moves too fast, so it causes a lot of jams. So you're constantly taking the mag out, constantly trying to undo it. You can't lock the bolt back to the rear, so that makes it kind of fun to deal with. The gun itself does have some like awkward ergonomics, like this is how you hold it. And part of the dumbest idea was putting these little bars up here as the restrike and charging. So to charge it, so I'm going to show you guys something. This is unloaded, and it wouldn't fire anyway. You're basically putting your finger in front of the barrel. Look at that. You press that down, let it go, and it charges. Now the second one here is for restrike, because you know rimfire is not all that reliable. So if you need to restrike, you press that one down. But this also just ejected the casing, or tried to load the next one in the magazine, which never really worked. So this gun wasn't just a failure and disappointment to me, it was a disappointment to the entire industry. Because essentially, Doug Donnelly, the owner of USFA, used to create really, really nice Colt single-action Army clones. Well, to fund this gun, he sold the machinery to those parts. So those guns no longer get made. The Zip failed terribly, and ultimately, his company failed. Now, I will say this is kind of neat. This is the only gun I've ever seen with a website advertised on it. What do you guys think about that? Kind of bizarre, right? Ultimately, the Zip was a failure. It was a waste of my money, but I've held on to it all these years as a reminder not to get my hopes up and that this industry creates some really terrible stuff. So these are my 5 weird guns. Still a beautiful day in Florida, so I have that to look forward to. So I like weird guns, even if I know they're not very good guns. I bought 4 of the 5 of these thinking they would be bad guns, and I was right. But ultimately, they're kind of neat, and they have an interesting story, or they look cool, or they do something different. It doesn't mean they're good. And now, as much as people like to say being different's good, it's not always true. With that in mind, what's your worst guns? What are the worst guns you've ever owned? What's a gun you'll never own again? Let me know in the comments, and let me know why, more specifically. I think that's more interesting than just driving by and saying the Glock 27 is the worst 40 Smith & Wesson gun to ever exist. That's boring. Tell me why. Tell me why you hate it. Do you have any experiences with any of these guns? Let me know about that too. I think that's interesting. Especially, I've had people tell me their Tech 9 works, and if that's the case, I'm really jealous. The only Tech 9 I know that works sings rap songs. So that's it. That's all I got. You guys have a great day. Thanks for watching.